Prepare for things to get worse. We're T-minus 5 days from the election, and riots and looting are erupting all over the country in the days before the election. So stick around for the rest of the video. We're going to talk about what's happening around the country and how it's going to increasingly get worse during the election and after. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about the civil unrest that's happening all over the country and how we can expect it to get worse the closer and closer we get to the election. However, it actually will probably even get worse after the election. It's something that we've been preparing for months now, and it's something that we are right on the cusp of when it comes to this election and the tumultuous environment that it has created. And we're all waiting to see what's going to happen come November 3rd. Hopefully your preps are in order and hopefully you've gotten some training and equipment put away for what may happen during this time. And I know you're preparing for SHTF scenarios. And if you are prepared or you're trying to make sure that you're ready for whatever unrest might come our way, hit the subscribe button below because we're trying to stay ahead of what's happening, and we want to make sure that with all this unrest and all this rioting and looting and everything else we're experiencing around the country, we can be as prepared as possible to make sure that we come out on top, okay? So, first things first, Washington State has their National Guard participating in training regarding the expectation of unrest to occur. So Washington State already knows that this election is tumultuous, and they know the way that their people and their constituents are going to act come November 3rd, either right before it or right after it or during it, whenever. They know something's going to happen. Unrest is definitely going to be part of that equation. So the National Guard in Washington State is currently dealing with military assistance for civil disturbance training. And what that means is that they're working with law enforcement agencies around Washington to see how the National Guard would deploy and how they would help law enforcement enforce the law in the sense of civil disobedience and civil disturbance happening around the state. And the National Guard is definitely something that hasn't been utilized as much in previous times as it has this year. We've seen it all over the place, and we've seen the National Guard units being brought out by their governors and being used to help quell some of the rioting and some of the looting we've been seeing. So the state's already on top of that concept, and they know that they might need their help and their assistance during this time. So that should be the first thing to let you know that things are going to get worse. If the states are already having their National Guard units trained for this situation and that expectation of unrest is already there, then we have to expect it as well, okay? So, Philadelphia has had nights and nights of unrest now. And of course, it's related to an officer-involved shooting of a black man, and that's what's been happening around this country. However, the rioting and the looting that's happening because of it is all for different reasons, of course. And the opportunity is there for people to create chaos and create doubt in the system, and at the same time maybe come ahead financially with whatever they steal or whatever they leave with after all this looting is occurring. Now, the thing that you have to watch out for in Philadelphia is that this has happened nights in a row now, and we're seeing an escalation of possible violence. And what I mean by that is that they found a van full of explosive devices just last night. Now, that van was full of M-type explosive devices. And my understanding of that is that that's generally reserved for things in the realm of fireworks, okay? But you have to understand that this is probing. These are probing tactics that we need to look out for. It's not about, oh, well, they just had a van full of fireworks. Of course, they're trying to cause chaos and disruption for whatever the police tactics might be. But in reality, you have to look at it from the bigger point of view. You have to say, okay, we were able to get a van full of explosive devices into an area where unrest was occurring, and yes, it was found out. But when things escalate, when things get increasingly more difficult in those situations, now they have an idea of what they can or can't get away with. Now they have an idea of what they should do next time in case they have some bigger plans of some kind. And that van full of M-type explosives might just be a probing tactic to see what they can do in the future. So those are things you have to watch out for. It's not just about the right now, okay? It's easy to brush it off and say, yeah, look at these people jumping around with fireworks trying to cause a problem. Well, you know what? That might not be the full-on strategy there, and you have to consider that things are more organized than what we like to give them credit for, okay? So, other things to watch out for. Now, Washington, D.C. is getting their own riots and looting, of course, and it's all involved with a death of someone who was on a moped involving police officers. Okay, so a lot has happened there, and I'm not here to talk about the different details of that particular event or the particular event that occurred in Philadelphia or any of that. We're talking about the civil unrest that has ensued because of these events and the fact that it has morphed into riots and looting more often than not. And in DC, that's what's happening. So, for some reason, in order to justify a cause, you go out and you break down the door of a sunglass hut. I'm not exactly sure how that all equates, but that's what's happening right now. And what you have to understand is that Washington, D.C. is a targeted area. It's not just some random city in the country. It is the city of the country. It's the, capital of our entire country. And during an election, if you want to ensue any idea that there is some kind of malpractice happening in our government when it comes to an election time, well, go ahead and just cause chaos and disruption throughout Washington, D.C. And this is definitely an opportunity being taken to create that chaos and create that disruption during this election. If you want people to question the outcome of an election, if you want people to think that the government might not be capable of actually processing this election correctly, why don't you make the city that they operate in look like it's chaos unfolding all over the place? Because in that sense, you're going to create a lot of optics that make it seem like the leadership and the government don't have their stuff together. And this is something that you have to keep in mind. This is an opportunity to create that chaos within Washington, D.C. It's not necessarily about anything else, but it's happening and it's something we have to watch out for. And DC is still an important place in our country that we need to keep an eye on. And this is what's happening there right now, right before the election, which we all assumed would occur. But we have to understand the opportunity is there now. And here's what we're also going to say about opportunity. The Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series. So LA, of course, was having a celebration. And in that celebration, riots and looting occurred. Now, this has happened many, many times in our history when it comes to sports championships of any kind at any major city. Anytime a Super Bowl or a World Series champ occurs, then the city who wins definitely seems to have some sort of unrest involving it, okay? But right now, the opportunity is there to take any large public gathering, anything you can think of when it comes to a large group of civilians, and turn it into riots and looting. It's becoming the precedent that has been set. This is the norm now. Anytime there's a large gathering, riots and looting. This is what's happening. Keep this in mind, especially leading up to the election. Do you want to be in a large gathering 5 days before this election? There's instigators. There's opportunists. There's people who are ready to use these situations to cause chaos and to create a situation where they can maybe have some financial gain. And you don't want to be involved in that place. You don't want to be where that's all happening. You don't want to be a part of that situation. And you have to really make sure you decide to be at the right places at the right times during the next 5 days and past that, okay? These opportunists and these instigators, they exist and they are there on purpose to sow chaos. And we're seeing that all over the country. This is why we have to prepare. This is why we only have 5 days until the election, and we know things are going to get extremely interesting leading up to it as well as after it. Now, here's the thing. The real issue we have to be watching out for is that this all is going to increase. This is all going to get worse, and this is all going to keep going even after the election. And it's not because of the election. It's not necessarily because of the way people feel politically. It's because of the economy. It's because of what's happening to us financially. We're in an extremely bad crisis right now financially in the sense of our country. You have to understand, every state in the country is expecting to have a deficit of their budget by the year 2022 of a total combined amount of $434 billion. $434 billion is what each state combined is going to miss the mark by over the next 2 years. That is the total public education budget for a year in this country. And you have to understand that that is what we're going to start seeing. Hyperinflation and raised taxes in order to try to correct course that are going to hurt us all in the meantime while this whole thing is trying to be righted. And it's not going to necessarily fix itself overnight. There's going to be some years ahead that are going to hurt a lot. And we have to be ready for that. And look at third world countries. Look at countries like even Venezuela. When people are not getting their basic needs met, when they can't get food, when they can't get water, when they don't have a roof over their heads, they hit the streets and they cause more chaos. And that's just going to keep happening in this country if things keep going the way they are. We have really hurt our economy over the last year, and we're having a really bad time right now trying to figure out how to fix it. And honestly, people like you and I are going to suffer the most, not the people at the very top and not the people in leadership. We all know that it's you and I. So prepare for that now. Understand that this unrest isn't going anywhere, and it's only going to get worse, especially when people start getting more and more desperate. Right now, there's a lot of political motivation for why people are acting the way they are. But wait till it's desperation motivation. Wait until it's they don't have a paycheck, they don't have food on the table, they don't have a place to live. Wait until that happens, because that's going to make things much, much worse. And right now, we're seeing it already escalate just because of political motivation. So, if you're preparing, make sure you're doing the best you can now with what you have now, okay? This is not a great time to be in, but we can definitely come out on top if we're all keeping ourselves positive and trying to do the best we can to prepare for it in the ways that we can, aka training, gathering equipment, stacking away food and supplies, making sure we have basic needs covered so when that time comes, we're not in the breadline waiting to see what we may or may not receive, okay? So keep these things in mind. Things are getting worse. We're watching them get worse right now on TV. We're watching them get worse all over the internet, and it's just going to get worse over the next 5 days. So 5 more days until this election. Remember, we've been preparing for this for months now. Keep it in mind that it's just going to look like things are getting worse, but hopefully for you and I, we're going to be just fine. So, without anything else to say about what's happening right now around the country, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.